Hey everyone, it's Crystal. Today I wanted to show you the basics of how to walk like a runway model versus in a pageant. Now, a lot of my videos have been focused on pageant walking, but I did get a request about how to walk for a runway for high fashion and for modeling in any type of scenario in which it's more about the clothes and less about you. The biggest difference in runway modeling and in pageants is your facial expression. Runway models, especially for high fashion, always look very, very stoic. And the reason why is that for high fashion, it's really about the clothes, it's about the accessories, it's about the look, especially if we're going couture. Having an expression is too much individuality, it's too much personality. A lot of designers are really looking for very thin, very live, human coat hangers. The biggest thing with runway is you just want to look very neutral. You can even smize a little bit, but by and large, you're not going to be as cheery, as warm, and as engaging with your eye contact as you would in a pageant. So you kind of want to just make sure that you have this veil on and to pull that persona out if you are a runway model. Remember, you are not you. You are a neutral canvas and a neutral palette for whatever the designer needs you to be. The next thing is really all about your hips. In runway modeling, the hips are everything. There isn't so much arms. Putting a hand on a waist, it's not really as much of a flare. Anytime that you are walking on a runway, there's a reason why it's really long and narrow. It's really just about having people see you from as many different angles as possible. The one thing about the runway walk is about hips. So you have to really move your hips, but moving your hips in isolation. When you move your hips, you're not moving anything else. It's really just all in the hips. Another thing about runway walking is where you place your feet. You're walking in a straight line, and sometimes you're even crossing this line. Your feet are always facing front, okay? You're not duck-footed. You could be a little pigeon-toed. I've seen runway models that walk with one foot in front of the other with a slight angle just to really accentuate and exaggerate the hip movement. You have to imagine that you're walking this invisible straight line in front of you. This really will help with your hip swaying as well. At the end of a runway, there's usually a pose or two. You don't usually do a pageant turn. Doing turns at the end of a runway, that's very pageanty. But most runways are just about doing one or two poses and then coming back where you came. I've also noticed that a lot of these poses tend to be open-legged poses, and in pageants, I generally see and would recommend a closed-legged pose, but the open-legged pose in a runway is a little more transitional, a little more pedestrian. I will also see sort of this sit into your lower back. It's a little bit more of sort of a openness, and it's almost like you're about to pivot and move, but it's definitely got a lean that most pageant poses do not have. Pageant poses are about being upright and being very svelte and S-shaped and kind of presented, but the runway pose is a lot more quick. It's oftentimes like, and then they just start moving. It's barely a pose. It's sort of like a hit, have my 50 photographers take my photo, and then walk back with my hips swaying, neutral face, walking this invisible dotted line. A big difference between pageant walking and runway walking as well is the facial expression when you were leaving and walking off stage. There is that little moment when you step out from the wings where in pageants, you really want to be smiling. That is go time. That's your first impression. The judges are looking for you. So you really want to be smiling before you step out on stage. You don't want to smile after you step out on stage because someone on the very edge of the theater will see you go from to turning it on like a light bulb. And you don't want to convey that difference. You want to be continually happy and friendly looking from the moment you step out. So you want to be smiling steps before you walk out of the wings. In a runway show, this might not be as relevant, especially if the style of the show is much more serious. If that's the case, you want to keep the same facial expression before walking out as walking out. That consistency is really important. In a pageant, when you're walking off stage, that is your last look. You really want to be smiling continuously, and not just smiling looking at the wall or looking backstage. You want to smile by presenting your face to the camera for as long as possible. There's a limit, you don't want to do anything like this because this is a little too much, but you still want to present yourself and have that moment when you're about to walk off stage be something that someone's like, I wish she was there for just a little bit longer. You want their eyes looking at you for as long as possible and for as long as you are on stage, especially if there are other contestants out there as well. In Chinese, there is this term that my mom taught me when I was young, which is 抢镜头, which literally means to fight for the focus. That's something that you want to get into your head as a competitor if you're competing in pageants, because making that eye contact is really telling the world, look at me, don't look at these chicks, look at me. So as you're walking off stage, that holds true too. In a runway though, you're gonna see models just walk straight off stage, like getting into their next outfit. So it comes down to the style of what you're really going for and the situation. Something that you may have noticed is in my demonstrations, I do have a little bit of a pageanty flair. I'm sorry, that is just the way I walk. I've developed this over years of being in pageants. You can take the girl out of the pageant, but you can't take the pageant out of the girl. My experience walking in runway shows has always been designers inviting me as Crystal, as Miss California, as someone who has been in pageants. So I personally like to smile in my shows. You have to look at the context in which you are going to be doing your runway or your ramp walk. Have they invited you as you, a pageant person or a personal brand? Are you wearing something that will allow you to put your hands on your hips? Are you going to smile, or are you going to have a more serious face, depending on the designer and the look that they are going for? So take a look at the context that you're doing this in and make those decisions for yourself. Please give this a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for future content. Thanks so much. Love you guys. Bye.